Good morning. This is Wednesday, April 6th. It is 9 a.m. and we are getting ready to embark on council time for Clark County Council. We begin with old business and the minutes for March 30. Is there a motion, please, for approval?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Corrections? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The minutes are passed. We next resume the discussion on hybrid meetings. Kathleen Otto, what have you found?
Yes, so the contractor has still not been able to schedule us to deal with the noise, or I'm not going to say noise, but the speakers in the hearing room. With that said, it does not prohibit the council from opening up or not a recommendation, but an option for you if you want to open sooner than the contractor is available is the council could come in, have our meetings in the hearing room. And we can test it out. We're going to actually test out some things today, but we can test it out with counselors who want to come in, maybe come in a little bit earlier. And if it's too hard to hear, we can set that counselor up in their office with a computer and have them join that way. So if you do want to open to the public and allow for in-person council and the public, we can certainly do that as early as next week, if you would like. Or the other option is we can wait until the sound is fixed by the contractor and then open it up at that time.
Your thoughts, council?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Councilor Medveji.
You know, I've done this before where I just brought my laptop in when I sat on the dais and it didn't work. I just picked it up and went back into my office, and then on our wireless system, you know, I was able to dial into the meeting pretty painlessly. So I don't think we need a rehearsal or a test. I think we should just do it. Obviously, even once we get a fix by our audio team, I'm not sure it will be a perfect fix until we actually try it. So I'm in favor of just trying it and getting back to public hearings.
Other thoughts?
Madam Chair. So
Yes.
Kathleen, and I'm in favor as well of trying to get back to in-person meetings. My question is, if there's no difference, if we already know it doesn't work, what would we be testing? We would either be in our offices in front of our computer, or in our home offices in front of our computer. But if we know it doesn't work, what's changed between? I guess that's my question. It would still be, even though it would be hybrid, would we just have people in the hearing room and not us because we can't hear, or how would that work?
Yeah, so the system does work. The problem that some may have is when you're sitting on the dais, when people are calling in from remote, the sound that's coming down from the speakers on the top makes it difficult to hear them. So that's the piece. I mean, we've sat in the hearing room for the first year of the pandemic, and it can be difficult to hear those who are calling in because of the way the sound's coming down. If people are in the audience, they don't have an issue with that because the sound goes back out. So it does work. It's just the part that council may want to try out is if you can hear and understand what's being said from those who are calling in. So if you want, and that's the piece, it's like because you are correct, if the council were to come in and we test it, when I say test it, it's to allow you to sit on the dais and see if you can hear, and if you can't understand, then we would move you to your office and get you on remotely at that time. Did that answer your question, Councilor Olson?
So Kathleen, are they testing headsets for those that are calling in, like I had suggested for the simultaneous translation that I experienced in the military? A Bluetooth headset up on the dais now.
Yes.
On your headsets, callers.
We do have some headsets. They're not noise canceling headsets. We are testing them this afternoon. But again, that's not going to stop. If you're on the dais, you can put in your headset, but we're not able to reduce the sound that's still coming down on top of the dais. But we do have that as well, and we'll be testing that.
If we take the step today to allow the public participation in person, can the counselors still participate remotely, not from their office, but from their home office?
Yes, absolutely. And I would still also offer that to staff who's presenting, that if they want to present remotely, that will still be an option. That is something we're doing with our internal meetings, that there's some departments that are meeting in person, but we are mandating that they have to continue that online option for those who may choose not to participate in person.
Any further discussion? I think for clarity, we probably need a motion so we all know for sure what we're doing in the future. So let's have a motion for, I guess, beginning next week's meetings. Would that be correct?
So, Chair, I'll make a motion open to amendment and massage, but I move that the council move to hybrid meetings with the option of in-person attendance for counselors and the public. Does that meet all of our, okay.
And I can clarify to Councillor Lentz, the OPMA, it still requires that we provide a remote access for the community members at this time. So that the hybrid is the new part, is the in-person, but we are still mandated by law to continue hybrid at least.
Great.
I'll second that
Question.
motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is there a second?
I seconded it.
Thank you, Counselor. I heard yesterday that when the regulation is changed so that it is no longer required that we offer remote access, that it will be required that there be the in-person attendance. Was that true, what I heard?
I have not heard that. I do know that there is a bill out there that is discussing allowing council to have remote meetings in the future, not while we're under an emergency declaration. I don't know if that is finalized yet. I believe Legal and I briefly touched on that yesterday, but it hasn't, to my understanding, it has not been finalized yet.
Mm-hmm.
If I may jump in, this is Lindsay. We're hearing from the governor's office that he's considering making changes to the proclamations and removing one of the emergency proclamations that would have an effect similar to what you're describing, that there would be a requirement to have in-person meetings with the hybrid option, that the fully remote requirement would be modified. We haven't seen any language yet from the governor's office, but that may be what you're hearing.
So for right now, this motion would be applicable to this next week and of course, until there would be further changes from the state. Yeah.
That is correct. And I don't think, even as you move forward, if the state says, only in person is required, I don't think that prohibits the council for continuing an online remote access for the community members as well.
Further discussion?
One more question of Lindsay. If my recollection from this last session, there was bipartisan support and the bill did move forward to allow county councils to meet remotely, meaning at a different location within their county, kind of rotating around the county. And I thought that passed. What were you tracking on that bill?
Yes, it did not pass. So it had passed one of, I believe it passed did it pass the House or the Senate? It passed one of the chambers and then died in the other.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further? Okay, so the motion before us is to have hybrid meetings starting next week with the option of in-person attendance by the public and counselors. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 I believe that is unanimous. Thank you very much. We now turn to the question of redistricting. And we have a council alternative map 1 that was drawn by the former master, Paul Newman. Shall we begin the discussion with Paul discussing this map?
I can go from there. Yes.
Great,
Happy to.
thank you.
Yes. May I share my screen? Right. It's good to see you all. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
And you can see my mouse, the cursor moving around? If I point something
Where is
out.
your mouse?
I'm sorry?
I don't see your mouse.
Okay.
Yes, it is visible in the middle of the screen.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's just the
Oh,
hand.
there it is. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes,
good,
tiny.
thank you. All right, excuse me. So my goal here is to walk you through how this map was made, or how I really altered it from the current set of councilor districts, which I have. So the current set of, this is going to be much like the small PDF map that you've seen so far, where the current councilor districts are shaded in a different color, and then the alternative that I've worked on here is in blue. The instructions that I received at the last meeting were generally to enlarge District 3 to include precinct 647, and also to keep precinct 484 in District 2. So to start there, I'm going to highlight those two precincts. There. All right. So in a nutshell, I started with District 3 and moved it to the city of Vancouver, to the eastern boundary of city of Vancouver. And I'll zoom in here a little bit. Forming the line that you see. So this this light shade here is the city of Vancouver, and this starting in the south around Highway 14, the eastern boundary of District 3 runs up the boundary of city of Vancouver. As we continue north, it goes beyond the city of Vancouver boundary and generally tries to connect in with Lacamas Creek, and continuing north to the Fourth Plain area. This extension eastward added about 29,000 people to the district. So I then needed to remove that, remove the area up here, which is also about 29,000 people. So really, to balance it out, I moved 29,000 people into District 4. Elsewhere, there were some minor adjustments to further balance, as you see here, and also, as you see here, over around I-5 in North Vancouver. Any questions? All right. How, any reaction to this map, or in terms of
Would you discuss it just a bit, the change in District 2?
District 2 was minimal. With the exception of the northern part here. You recall from earlier maps that District 5 had a deficit of nearly 5,000 people. So to make that up, this area was moved into District 5, south of Ridgefield, and also this area, the small area in green, was moved into District 5, and that brought it pretty much into alignment with just 325 people above the target.
Madam Chair, I have a general question for Paul.
Okay, go ahead, Councilor Medvici.
And I don't know if this is something you're tracking, but obviously prior to this redistricting effort, both by us and by the county electorate, there was quite a bit of disproportionate districts. I mean, my district originally, I think, had close to 10,000 people more than any other district. And that results obviously from unequal population growth between redistricting or between census. So the question gets to be, do we have a bead, some kind of forecast on how much more quickly District 1 would grow compared to District 2, compared to District 3, 5, and 4? Right now, you have a pretty good balance of population, much better than it had originally been under either map, any of the previous maps. But do we have a forecast? Will this look very different in another year or two, depending on relative growth amongst the districts? Is that being tracked at all?
We do predict population growth. It's somewhat tied in with the DBLM, they can build mobile lands model. However, that's not really a criteria in redistricting. The sole source of population for redistricting is really a snapshot created by the 2020 census, April 1st, 2020. That is really the only, according to what I understand, is the only set of population numbers to use when redrawing the boundaries or predicting future growth. I certainly understand that. I can certainly empathize with that, but that's not really a criteria when.
Yeah, so I wasn't suggesting it should be a criteria. I was just pointing out that as a snapshot today, it may balance out, it may get more askew over the future years.
Yes, good question though.
Before we expand the discussion, Paul, I just have to give you a huge thank you. You're amazing, really, with how you come forward with these maps on very short notice. I don't know if you dream about these precinct boundaries or what. I know that I would if I were trying to create a map like this, but you did a terrific job on very short order. I know I picked up the map yesterday from the office and went through it in detail with the precincts and was just very impressed with your work. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is there discussion from council? Councilor Olson, you may be cleaning your screen.
I'm trying, sorry.
Or waving your hand for
Yeah,
attention.
I know. Sorry, I was trying to find the mute button. So, thank you for recognizing me when I finally figured it out. Paul, so we are obligated under state law to put forward or to adopt a map that is consistent with, I think, 5 criteria under the RCW. Do you have those in front of you? Or I don't know, maybe Chris is on. I just want to make sure that we're consistent and following the law here and that this map meets those criteria.
Yes, I have a if you can see this, this is a kind of cleaned up, did a copy and paste of the RCW. So I certainly did no wordsmithing here, but I did sometimes difficult to read. So I added spacing and also some underlining. So it does talk about, right, nearly equal population, compact as possible. Each district should be geographically contiguous. Population data may not be used for purposes of favoring or disfavoring racial group or political party. And really, yeah, to the extent feasible, try to use natural boundaries and preserve existing communities of related or mutual interest. I will comment on a question about natural boundaries has come up a couple of times with different groups. And some of my reading, I mean, obviously things like streams come to mind, but often, roads are often used as well. And I think the closest thing I can see to justify that or further explain it is actually a snippet from the state of Washington Constitution, which also, this redistricting item may be more related to legislative, but it talks about natural geographic barriers and also artificial barriers. So I'm not a lawyer, but I'm certainly it certainly seems to be a strong trend to enable use of roads when forming boundaries, and I think in just an intuitive sense, the larger the road, such as an interstate, the more natural it might be in forming a boundary. Along with these, we've been with these items in the RCW, we've been really strongly encouraged by the elections office to use precinct boundaries, to use existing precinct boundaries. And I have done that as well here with these maps, that some of the jaggy boundaries or complex boundaries are following precinct boundaries, which also may happen to follow community boundaries, such as the city of Vancouver.
Okay, thank you. And actually, my follow-up question was going to be about the precinct boundaries, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. At this, compaction or compactness is also a component here. Would you like me to talk a little bit more about that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, on the PDF maps that I've shared, I've included a small table with a lot of numbers here, and I'm not going to, let's see, I'll just zoom in. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of numbers that are kind of hard to decipher or understand. So let me take a moment and kind of back up a little bit on that, what those mean. So this is an example, hypothetical example. The most compact 2D shape is a circle. And so that would be perfect compactness, I guess, would be a district shaped as a circle, as you see here on the left. The point of this slide is both of these shapes, both the circle and this odd-looking, hypothetical district, is that they're both 35 square miles. But the perimeter of the circle is 21 miles, where the perimeter of this second shape is 39. So when we try to come up with these numbers that describe the level of compactness, while the formulas are a little more complex, they're basically comparing the perimeter to the area, kind of a ratio of sorts. So so that's the concept. And as I've already mentioned or shared with you, I include a report of these two tests called the Polsby-Popper and also the Groffman test that try to provide a number for compaction on these various districts. So here with alternative one, we see that the most compact district with alternative one is 3. The least compact is District 1. And I'll talk a little bit more about factors that go into that, But I believe it was Councillor Medvegy, when we talked in January, had a great idea to take a look at the compaction scores for the legislative districts for the state of Washington that were just approved. And that was a wonderful suggestion. And I've moved forward with that. Here's a map of the approved legislative districts, 49 of them. And you'll know we're going to zoom into the Puget Sound area, the Seattle area, where we find the most compact district and the least compact district. The most compact district is 36 here, which is roughly a rectangle. And the least compact district is this area around Renton. What played into this, I'm not fully sure, but it is, in terms of the measures that we've been using, the same measures that I've been using with the councilor maps. These are the most compact and least compact. So let's try to kind of summarize these. What I'm showing you here are some charts of alternative B2, which came out of the redistricting committee, the 49 legislative districts, which I just shared with you, a map, and then the alternative one. This is these charts are showing the minimum and maximum scores plus the average. So if we look at we just looked at the legislative districts. So this low, the bottom of this blue column represents the lowest score, which would probably be that area in Renton, which is the least compact. And then the top of this column would be that other district which has the best level of compaction, which is partially out in the water of Puget Sound. And then the red dot is the average. And the pattern is pretty much the same with the other test, which is kind of inverted, where the lower score is more compact. But let's just kind of focus in on this Polsby-Popper set. I think a takeaway for me is that the legislative districts showed a significant range of variability of compaction, yet they were still, they were approved. And comparing alternative B2 and the current alternative 1, I'm seeing that the averages are pretty close to each other, and certainly the range of variability in compaction is much smaller than what we see with the legislative districts. So it was, the numbers are interesting, but it was very nice to get something else to compare them with. Are there any questions? I have one more point on this, but are there any questions on this?
Paul, I'd like to hear you. It's very interesting to look at the red dots on the left-hand chart, because they are indeed very close. But the high end of the compaction score differs quite a bit, particularly with alternative 1 being significantly lower than the other two. Given that compaction is a criterion, what do you make out of this difference? Is it something to be concerned about? Is it significant to the council, do you think, in decision making, or what?
I don't think it's significant. And let me point out one item that plays into this. District 3, as we're in alternative 1, follows the city boundary here to the north, and also follows a meandering stream, which is Lacamas Creek in the northeast. These are great boundaries because they're, the Lacamas Creek is natural, truly natural. And then of course, the northern boundary here is a community of interest, City of Vancouver. These are complex lines that add, really reduce the level of compaction. My first example, these make the perimeter of the area longer, which I guess worsens the compaction score, but it's completely legitimate in terms of using these boundaries. So there's a bit of nuance. I mean, I'm a numbers guy. I like numbers. You can make charts and whatnot and get a nice graph, but there's also certainly nuances here to take into consideration.
Oh, thank you. That's very clear. And by the way, it is also clear that you are a numbers guy. We like that.
Yeah.
Is there
Right.
other discussion or questions from council?
Chair, do we have,
Yes.
is Chris on with us? Chris Cook or Leslie?
I am.
So when we go back to the 5 criteria, I know there's been some communication. When we go back to the 5 criteria, does this map, does it favor any or disfavor any racial group or political party based on what we're seeing this morning?
I mean, based on the evidence that I've seen in the maps, I don't see anything that impacts number 4, or, when we're talking about favoring or disfavoring a racial group or political party, it means, groups of people. I haven't heard any data that talks about either racial groups or political parties. So based on what I've seen, I don't see that particular criteria has not been met. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
It does, yeah. And then just generally, I think, I asked Paul to go through it for that specific purpose. At this point, this map looks like it, I mean, given the evidence that's on the record, that this map is something we can approve this morning, or not approve, but we can move forward to hearing, to public comment that meets the criteria under which we have to create the map at this point.
It appears to meet the criteria for if the council decided, a majority of the council decided to approve it as a draft to then go to public hearing at that point, which I understand is set for next week. Any other questions for me?
No, thank you. Not for me. Thanks.
Thanks.
I'd make a motion to approve, Madam Chair.
And may we take that to be to approve as a draft to move to hearing? What is the date next week, Kathleen?
It is on April 13th at 8:30.
And is that acceptable, Councilor Medvigi?
Yeah, I just saw a comment pop up. I was looking to see what was in the chat.
I don't believe that was the chat. I believe that was an internal communication on Microsoft Teams that came across,
Okay.
but the
Yeah,
chat function is not open.
Thank you. It was like a weird subliminal that came up.
Sorry, that was me. Sorry. Sorry to interrupt also, but may I make another point regarding the map that I wanted to
You
point
know,
out.
indeed you may. First, I would like to ask for a second to the motion so we don't get lost.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I'll second it for further discussion.
Okay, thank you so much. Paul, please go ahead.
I also wanted to point out Vancouver Lake. This is a precinct, I think it's 112. Yeah, you'll, I want to point out that most of the alternatives created by the Redistricting Committee and also this alternative moves this, let me highlight this area. Yeah. The alternatives created so far moves this precinct from District 2 into District 1. And that was actually, the thought originated from the Redistricting Committee. Involves about 182 people that live there. And the move was brought up mainly for just to, as you notice on the southern portion of Vancouver Lake, the lines are very complex and somewhat distracting. And I think it was almost for an aesthetic reason. And also the fact that there's the geographic feature of Lake River that runs up here, as well as the railroad line that justified the move of this precinct into District 1. So I want to highlight that. It's not a must do, but I just want to make sure that you realize that that's part of this alternative as well.
Would you, Paul, please trace the district lines on the southern border of District 2 between District 2 and 1?
Yes. Let's see. Just a moment. Turn off precincts, and I will turn off getting there. Okay. Is that providing the highlight that you're looking for?
Yes, it does. And the lake is clearly all within District 1, as you said.
Yes. Yes. Again, it's in this alternative. However, in what was on the ballot last November, turn this off. Right, this precinct was in District 2. So that is a change. Just want to make sure that you're aware of that.
When you say this precinct, are you referring to Vancouver
112.
Lake, which also happens to be a precinct, or what?
Yes. This this precinct 112, which encompasses Vancouver Lake and the area north of the lake, is moved.
Okay, other questions? Discussion, I should say.
Yeah.
Yes, Councillor Lenz.
First, Paul, thank you. You and the department, as always, have done great work and done it quickly and efficiently and effectively, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
An important point has been kind of glided over in this discussion, which is that the map that we're looking at today, which I think actually has a lot of merits as far as keeping contiguous communities together. But it was created because of a request specifically last week by counselors to protect them and keep them in their current districts so that they could run as incumbents in a future election. And it's important to remember that redistricting is about voters, not about who runs for office. And this map needs to serve us for 10 years. So we should be trying to create a solid process and base our decisions on a solid process that benefits the electorate, not individuals. But this process went off the rails from the very beginning and it's never regained course. I feel that we as council shouldn't be in this position where we are drawing the lines of our own districts and then voting on them. Because of the bad process, that's where we've gotten to. But especially because the council went on the record last week specifically asking for a map that protected counselors. We are now on the record with council putting personal political ambition over public benefit. Regardless of the merits of the map, I find that problematic. And I would love to see this entire council, all four of us, recuse ourselves from this drawing of the lines and send it back to staff, led by the county manager and the GIS department, to draw the best map they can, adhering to the guidelines and statute, and bring us that map to a hearing that we then either approve through consent agenda or that we then follow the spirit of our charter and amend it by that 2% per district so that we can get this process back on course, remove the problems of personal versus community benefit, and keep this council do the best we can to have a defendable process and ideally eliminate the possibility of accusations of personal over community gain. I understand that may not be the direction the council goes. I understand that's not the motion on the floor, but I wanted to explain why I'm not going to be supporting this motion, regardless of the potential merits of the map.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Councillor Maybidgy.
Yeah, thank you. So I would ask Temple Lentz to reconsider. It was an interesting argument that you just made, but it wasn't what the council asked or was doing last week that resulted in this map. District 5 is a new district. That's what the voters broke it down into 5 districts. And District 5 is empty right now. It's vacant. Hopefully the governor will fill it soon. But no matter what, the public will get to vote in the next general election. District 4, I'm in District 4. I've been in District 4. I was in District 4. Under any of the maps, I'm in District 4. District 1, Temple Lentz, you're in that district. You're still in that district. I think under all the maps, you're in that district. Julie Olson's in District 2. She was in District 2. She's still in District 2. You know, I think under one of the iterations that didn't move forward, she may have been moved to District 5, but she's in District 2 now. So, and Councillor Bowerman was in District 3. This would put her remaining in District 3. It's the status quo. It's not advocating for any particular councillor. It's maintaining the status quo. There was nothing in the ballot that suggested to move any particular councillor anywhere. So that wasn't something the public knowingly voted for or intended. You know, there's different terms of art that you can use versus knowing versus intentional versus inadvertently moving 3 councillors into one district. That would have been an untoward result, somewhat, you know, what we in the legal trade called res ipsa loquitur. You know, boy, it looks suspicious. to benefit one party or to hurt one party when you lump 3 counselors into one district. But be that as it may, I'm going to assume it was inadvertent. It was not done intentionally, but it was done knowingly. And that was in the papers. And so this fixes all of that, but it doesn't really undo anything or change anything. It doesn't help any particular party. And there's been an absence from any party or any individual coming up on the radar screen and saying, you know, this really favors a majority or favors a minority or favors someone more than another. None of that has happened. So none of the population movement or rebalancing is anything but neutral. And so I'm assuming the absence of any party coming up on and screaming, hey, you've just slanted who's the balance of power here. None of that is evident. So I appreciate your creative argument there, but this really maintains the status quo as the counselors. It doesn't benefit anybody. But it does look pretty good, and we should put this behind us and move on as much as we can. Obviously, individuals can still bring lawsuits and challenge it in court, but this is a fair redistricting. It's a fair redistricting, and it looks pretty good, especially compared to some of the comparison that Paul did with some of the other legislative districts throughout the state. We did a pretty good job here. It'll never be perfect, and lines are always irregular. So in any case, I would like to put this behind us. Let's move forward.
Leslie, I have a question for you, please. It was suggested, as I understand it, that the task of redrawing the map be given to staff, to the county manager, and so on. I don't recall seeing that as an option in an RCW or other document. Is there any call for that from a legal perspective?
Not aware of that. I'm pulling up the RCW now just to see if it has anything to that effect. I believe what it says, let's just pull it up here. It just says it is the responsibility of each county to come up with to create the map. It doesn't say how that is to be done. In other words, it doesn't say it's the staff of the county, but that the county is required to do it. So there is nothing in the statute that specifies how that is to take place other than the 5 criteria are to be used in order to create the map.
There's the whole discussion of the redistricting committee and its role.
Not in the RCW. The RCW doesn't talk about the redistricting committee. That came from the charter.
Right. And so if we could add the charter in there, is there any designation of a role for county staff? Or what do you see from a legal perspective as the options?
Sure, let me pull up the charter. Find the right one here. Excuse me. So Charter Section 6.5 talks about the redistricting committee. And then Section 6.6 is the redistricting plan. It talks about the redistricting master and the committee. And then it talks about the language how the redistricting plan shall be adopted and amended as it is submitted by the committee to the council. But there is nothing in here that states that the county staff is to do anything in particular other than, in this case, the redistricting master happened to be county staff. But I don't see any language in the charter or the RCW that indicates that county staff is to do something related to the map. Legally, the council, as the county legislative body, is required to have the proposed map and then have a hearing for public comment and then vote on a map. It doesn't indicate how that is to occur. In other words, how county staff is to do that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Chair,
Is
I'd
there
like to
further discussion?
respond. Chair, I'd like to respond to a couple of comments.
Go ahead, Councillor Lentz.
Thank you. Related to the legal question, I'm going to go deal with that and then go back to an earlier comment. Reading the RCW, it does appear to simply be that it is the county's responsibility. So I think that a read of that could very easily be that the council could say, we pass this to staff. And even if others do not want to embrace the idea that personal decision-making has been compromised here, as the people representing the districts that for which the lines are being drawn, it is inappropriate for us to be voting on them. Whether or not it is illegal or gerrymandering or some legal definition, it simply looks and feels and smells bad. And so if there is a way that we could pull that out of the conversation and try to bring this back to a strong process and try, at this late in the game, to try some Hail Mary to bring this back on the rails, I think that would be good for this council to do. To go to an earlier comment, the purpose of redistricting, once again, is about voters, not who runs, and it is not to maintain the status quo. It occurs because of 10-year cycles of population change. So politicians get redistricted out of their districts every 10 years all across the country. That may not be desirable, but that happens. It happens here in Clark County, in our legislative districts. This council is on the record last week, as recent as 1 week ago today, directing staff specifically to make sure that the shaded precincts that are in front of us right now were within the boundaries so those councilors could stay within their boundaries. That removes competition from District 4, and it protects incumbency for Districts 3 and 2. That may not be legally wrong, but it sure looks bad. And I would like to see this council put forward a map that removes those concerns. If that's your choice to go forward with this, so be it. But I suggest that there's another option.
Madam Chair.
Councillor Olson.
Thank you. So this has been a bumpy, that's not even a good description of it, process since the beginning, since the committee was formed, or committees. So it's been an issue from the beginning. This has been a not a very good process here in Clark County from the beginning, from the committee selection to, Leslie, no offense, legal advice, this court decision on where a comma should go. This is clearly not how a redistricting process should go. And hopefully we get to clean this up sometime in the next 10 years so we don't have to be in this position again. This has been a terrible process from the beginning. But what we have now in front of us however we got here, is a map that meets the RCW. We started on this process last year. It's now April. We have elections coming up. I don't want to, in this point, I don't want to delay this anymore. This is a draft. We have public comment next week. It's not a final product yet. I appreciate Councillor Lentz's comments and concerns. I've read them in the, I've gotten emails. I appreciate that. But this is sitting in our lap. And I think at this point we need to move it forward. I think it's legally sound. And it's just been I don't want to use the corrupt, it's just been an ugly process from the beginning. And I really hope we clean this up for next time, but I'd like to move this forward for public comment.
Further comments? Councilor Mabiji, did you have additional things to say?
No, I would just like to move this forward. As Councilor Olson just said, we have so much on our plate that we're working on, and this has been a bumpy path that I would like to take one giant leap forward and get it to public hearing.
From my own perspective, this was not my request per se at all, but this is the one map that is before us now. We do not have a potpourri of choice. I had voted previously for a different map, and I still have some partiality to that, but that's neither here nor there because that's history. That's a part of that bumpy history that you mentioned. Does this map number 1 represent anything about voter choice? Of course it does. In fact, if we added up the votes involved in this particular approach, they're way more than what was in the voters pamphlet, which, as I understand it, needed to be redone anyway because of population changes. So where to go from here is clearly the question. There's council, there's asking staff, and they're sending it back to the redistricting or the former redistricting committee for the 3rd time is an option that hasn't been mentioned, but it's out there. My concern with the latter 2 is that we begin to impact the election process more than is desirable. For us to take things a different direction than the way they are before us now, it concerns me that there would be some upsetting to that election process. And I would like to see us do the best of our ability to make that be a smooth process, even though for sure this one has not been. And I agree from day one, it has not been. But how to make it something now that does reflect voter interest, voter preference, and has the least impact on disruption to elections. And by the elections, I'm talking about the ones that are coming up in the primaries for this year. And if we disrupt those by not having a decision, I would be concerned. I must tell you that I'm really, and have been from the moment that I heard the discussion on the creation of this map, very torn. I come very close to not voting for it for reasons that don't include everything that I just said, but because of an inference that this is for some kind of personal gain. I can assure you it is not. It is not for any personal or political gain at all. That is neither here nor there. It is simply a map, as far as I see it, that at this point is available to us to vote for. So unless there's further discussion, I think we should go ahead with the motion that's before us. Hearing none, the the motion was to move this map as a draft to hearing to be held April 13 at 8:30 a.m., where there would be public testimony, public hearing involved on it. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed?
No.
By a vote of 3-1, the motion is passed. So now we move to the rules of procedure and the ordinance associated with that.
Madam Chair. I just have to,
That was Councilor Olson, yes.
yes, right. I just have to step out for 1 minute. I will be right back, but go ahead. I'm not going to miss anything at the beginning. I'll be right back.
Okay, thank you. And for the rules of procedure, is this Lindsay or is this Kathleen who is presenting this?
I believe Lindsay will be presenting, and she'll be sharing the current updates from the last conversation that council has had.
Would you like me to wait for Councilor Olson or go ahead?
She's back. Go ahead. Thank you.
So what's before you is the revised draft of the rules of procedure. There's two substantive changes that have been made to this document. The first, we can scroll down to the first red section. The first of which, and I spoke to you in there it was. So one of the charter amendments that was enacted by the voters last fall removes the requirement that had been in the charter that where there are multiple county councilors that are representing the county on boards or commissions, that would be chair +1 or chair +2, whatever the case may be. Obviously, as otherwise required by law, there are certain things that it wouldn't be the chair, but unless it's otherwise prescribed, it was going to be the chair would automatically be one of those positions, and then another counselor or counselors would fill the remaining positions. So that requirement was eliminated with one of the charter amendments that was enacted last fall. So this change here similarly removes that requirement from the rules of procedure, and simply then the rules will say that the council will vote to appoint members to serve on boards and commissions. So that's that change. And then if we want to scroll down to the remainder, so in response to the previous council time discussion we had about the rules of procedure, there was an interest from the council in looking at, I think it was described as adding some teeth to the document. So looking, and specifically to look at Pierce County as an example in their code of ethics. So the code of ethics, as we've talked about, is a little bit different than a code of professional conduct. They're just kind of two different creatures, though there are similarities certainly. So I took what I could from the Pierce County model and put it into a rules of procedure model. And that's what you have before you here, that allegations will be brought forward. Then the council will look to determine whether or not there has been a violation of the rules of professional conduct, can prepare written findings and a conclusion regarding that. One of the things that's within the Pierce County model is there are financial penalties as a possible sanction for violations. So that is in here, but including a civil penalty of not more than $5,000 or any damages sustained by the county caused by the conduct constituting the violation. Public admonishment, public resolution of censure, removal of the violators from the committees in which he or she is representing the county, or simply a cease and desist of the violations of the code of professional conduct. So again, these are coming out of that Pierce County model, which is really aimed more at the ethical violations. It may not fit for the rules of professional conduct, but wanted to give this as a starting place for discussion if the council still wants to add some more, as you said, teeth to the matter. But this really is intended to be a starting place for council discussion on that topic. And so I believe we have this scheduled for hearing for April 19th. we can move that, but we'll be interested in council's comments and feedback on that, and then we can revise the draft in anticipation of that April 9th hearing if we still want to move forward.
Any questions or comments?
Yeah, Madam Chair, so it hadn't really dawned on me until after yesterday's discussion and then reading this again this morning and then now. So if we have a complaint from the public, either on ethic complaint or a code of conduct complaint, in my mind, it should go to our newly forming ethics committee. If there is a majority of counselors that believe that a code of conduct violation has occurred, I would also think that it should be referred to that ethics committee right away instead of us doing some kind of determination. I guess what I'm getting at is I don't see a pathway to this ethics committee that should be different, whether it's from the council itself or a member of the council or a member of the public. So that was my only concern in reading this procedure that you have up on the screen right now in light of yesterday's public discussion and some of the discussion we had about the ethics committee.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilor Olson.
Yeah, I think I would agree with Councilor Medvedev. This section 3, we're talking about a potential civil penalty of $5,000 for a code of conduct potential violation. I find that to be more than just teeth. I think it's significant overkill. This whole section 3 to me, other than that we might move it over to the ethics committee, I think is not necessary. I mean, if we want to have something about public admonishment or removal of boards or whatever, I think we can do that. But, section C down here refers to RCW chapter 9, which is a criminal code. So I don't see where this fits under our code of professional conduct section. I appreciate Lindsay's, looking out to see what's out there, but I don't really see where this fits what we're trying to do in terms of professional conduct and its connection to what we did yesterday with our code of ethics and our ethics commission. So that would be my, I won't support this if that section's in here. I just think it's complete overreach. And I would never, and I can't imagine ever voting to fine or to assess a penalty of a fellow counselor for a code of conduct violation. So that's just my perspective on that.
Yeah, I agree with both of the preceding statements. I think that as constructed, having the council decide what occurs with a member of the council would actually leave us in the same problematic place we experienced earlier with the previous ethics process under the rules of procedure and code of conduct, where it's to refer back to my comments earlier in the previous matter we were discussing, it doesn't look great. It's not only, it's unworkable, but it's also a bad look for the council to be voting on matters that affect itself. So I think that figuring out a way to perhaps advance it to the ethics commission and slightly perhaps broadening their scope to deal with professional conduct complaints related to the council, so that anything that comes forward could be referred to them would be our wisest course. I also do agree that the penalties in section 3 seem out of proportion to what we have seen as potential violations, potential or actual violations of code of conduct.
Is there other discussion?
Yeah, Madam Chair. Oops, sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
I just have one question. I don't, Leslie, I assume you're still here. So assuming there's no language in our rules of procedure with regard to a resolution of censure or a resolution of public admonishment, I believe that's an action that the council could take at any particular time with a majority vote. And I mean, am I wrong there? Does it have to be in the rules of procedure for the council to take some action like that?
No, it doesn't need to be in the rules of procedure, although an argument could be made that, you know, a counselor could say, well, it's not in our rules of procedure, so, you know, you're not following process. I could see an argument both ways, but no, I don't think you would be required to put it in the rules of procedure.
And if I could ask just a quick question also of Leslie, if the council chooses to send these concerns to the Ethics Commission, are we going to have to amend the code that described the scope of the Ethics Commission that the council adopted yesterday?
That's a good question. I would have to look into that, but it just off the top of my head, it would make sense that yes, since there already is a code that explains what the Ethics Commission is required to do, if you're adding duties to them, it seems appropriate to then have to amend the code to reflect that.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
So looking at this code again, and this section 3, if we were to not send code of conduct complaints over to the Ethics Commission, but we were to look at conduct complaints as a council, if we look at, you know, section A, I think that's okay. Certainly I would want to take out section II. The rest is public admonishment, a resolution of censure. And then I'd certainly want to take out section C and 4. But if we left those there, you know, if we left the rest of that section there, that could eliminate the need to go back and amend the Ethics Commission charter and expectations and actions or responsibilities, and then maintain for the council with regard to professional conduct to sort of, I don't like the word police itself, but to remind each other that we have agreed to this particular code of conduct, professional conduct, and that we are asking you to do that. And if you don't, then these are the things that we will do as a body, which might be, you know, public admonishment, resolution of censure, what have you. So just a thought.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that perspective in general, and in part because we have separated the notion of ethics violations from professional concerns, and I think that's appropriate. They are, in my opinion, and in the opinion of most codes of ethical conduct, they are in fact different. So by commingling them on the Ethics Commission, I have concern that they would in fact become commingled, and that could be a very negative thing for individuals who had perhaps violated some professional code, but then it became an ethics complaint, which is definitely a more serious matter of concern in the law and every place else. So for that reason, I concur as well on this. I think this needs to be reworked and massaged yet again before it can go for a public hearing. And I don't think we can do it right here, right now. It's a little bit too complicated for that.
So one option, I can revise a draft and get that to you no later than the end of the week. I think I could get it to you tomorrow. And we could talk about it in council time next week on the 13th and still preserve the hearing date on the 19th. That's one option that we could do.
Mm-hmm. Does that sound agreeable to all? Let's proceed that way. And we don't have a motion, so let's just do it that way.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Sorry, there's one other, if we're off this topic, if there's another comment on this topic, I'll wait. But I do have a question on one other topic on this rules procedure.
Go ahead.
I have one, Councilor Olson, I have one that's still under the violations section, but if you're still in that larger section, then I can wait.
Okay, so under under the county budget, section XV, we put this in last year in terms of amendments to the budget, and I think it was a good move. I do want to just make sure that, and maybe Leslie, you can chime in here, that we still have, and this happened in our last budget when the sheriff was providing testimony, that we still are obligated to take public testimony and potentially make amendments as a result of public testimony, either from the community or from our other electeds. And I just want to make sure that it's under section C, where it says amendments to the proposed annual and supplemental budgets must be distributed to each counselor at least 48 hours before the meeting, which it is to be presented. So I understand that if we're working on some amendments, that we respect our other counselors, get them out ahead of time. But occasionally there are some amendments that need to be made on the dais based on information we didn't have 48 hours prior. I just want to make sure and we did it, it's fine, but if it's in the rules of procedure, that there's some ability to do that, or there's some allowance in the rules to accommodate that.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Olson. And which section are you looking at here? You said section C?
Yeah, section C of XV, yeah.
And so the question is here, it requires that proposed amendments are to be distributed at least 5 days before, but in practice that it doesn't always work that way. If for some reason you need it, that same day or very, as you said, during the meeting.
Yeah, on the dais. Yeah, I mean that amendments and decisions can and should be allowed to be made based on information provided at a public meeting.
What I would suggest then is that you change the language, because right now it says must be distributed to each counselor at least 48 hours. You could change that to say, should be, encourage, what you could change that language so that it's not a requirement.
Right, and I guess I'll put this to the council. And I believe this is the proper practice. I just want to make sure that we're not limiting ourselves to what we have an obligation to do based on what we hear during a meeting, and that may be to change our minds or make a decision or create an amendment at the public meeting.
It could be that we could add, we can keep that language in there, but also add that this does not prohibit the council from making amendments based on information received during the public hearing. Because the goal of this language was, if, like you said, if counselors are looking at doing an amendment, to be transparent with the fellow counselors. But that's the whole point of a public hearing, is to get public testimony. And, and that may, not just with other electeds, but that may influence your decision and amendment. So we can work in some language in there that keeps this in there to help the council get what you can ahead of time, but also provides that flexibility that a public hearing is intended for and allows the council to make adjustments based on feedback.
The only other way to do it would be, I know currently we separate out, when the elected officials testify, you could spread this out to receive public comment and then shorten it to, notice has to be provided in 2 days or something. And then so that you don't have kind of spur of the moment amendments, that budget amendments would have to be posted 48 hours in advance. If you really want to keep that, then we'd have to have the public comment first and then have the actual hearing. So you'd have to really spread out the way we do the budget hearing process.
So I would ask legal we need to work through that, because the purpose of a public hearing is to get the public testimony, which could influence the decision. So I think we have to have them in conjunction, and we can't do public testimony and then the hearing. The hearing is for the public testimony, but we can work through that link.
Is there any thoughts from other counselors on that topic? Any objection or additional thoughts?
I don't have any objection to it. I think it's a really good point, and completely agree that we should if we're planning amendments, bring them forward early, but have that flexibility to respond to the moment.
Council, if I may, what we can do is we can work on some language and I can take a look at it so that you'll have it ready for next week.
Yeah, so I don't disagree that we should have flexibility to make amendments. It's just what we were trying to do with that rule, which I think was a good idea and good purpose, was to overcome these on-the-fly amendments that catch at least some of the council by surprise, give no notice to the public, so there is no public comment on it. And so in the instance, and it really came from the judiciary budget a couple of years ago, you know, we really had no questions for the judges because because it was recommended that the package was not going to be approved. So then the amendment came and it got approved. We had no public comment on it, and nor the hearing entail any questions in detail of the presiding judge at the time. So it really was a very poor process. So the rule to include that time period so people could respond to it is a really good rule, but it shouldn't obviously prevent amendments. And so I think that's where your focus on further adjustment to the language may be.
So if there aren't further comments, I think we are ready to move on. Anything else to add, Kathleen?
Yeah, the only thing I want to add, and it's not recommending any changes, but I did want to acknowledge, you know, our constituents in our community, I appreciate them coming to these meetings, participating on how they do, whether, you know, even though they can't do public comment now. And I just want to say thank you to them, because one of them actually did email me, and some of them do often, regarding one of the updates that was presented this morning on the council board assignments that they had recognized that wasn't there. And so I just want to say thank you, that the community, we do hear you, we do listen, and I appreciate the feedback and welcome it. So that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're ready to move to new business, and is there any?
There's no new business this morning.
How about councilor reports?
I have a few that I'd like to mention.
Okay, go ahead, Councilor Medvigi.
So regarding the RFP for Lake Vancouver, I want to say one of the stakeholders raised his hand to me. He sits on the Lower Columbia Fish Recovery Board with me, and we've discussed what the county has issued. But so he represents the Cowlitz Indian tribe. He's the interim director right now of their Natural Resources Department. He really, and it's Rudy Solitary, he really wants to be a stakeholder and participate actively on behalf of the tribe in any work going forward on Lake Vancouver. So I thought that was a really great thing that he has stood up and offered their help and support. The other is we did have our first meeting of our ARPA committee for small businesses and nonprofits. We were putting together a pretty aggressive timeline so that we are able to make selections and move that money out into the community. So there will be, that's in the works right now. Mark Gassaway is really working hard after that first inaugural meeting. We also, and I don't think it's come up before, except by email, you know, we had the issue with the YMCA seeking our support, county support, basically seeking everyone's support in building a pool among another amenity in the battleground area. They have really put together a very comprehensive funding plan. And right now they're seeking some grants, and they're looking for a letter from one or more of us or all of us, Lindsay has the letter, and I think she circulated it to everyone, but they really need that letter so that they can seek some grants. It's not committing us to specific money right now. But any case, I raise that because we really do have to address the issue of the letter, whether it's going to be under coming from the entirety of the council. I fully support it. I think it'll be a great public-private partnership amongst a lot of different entities, and it'll be a regional draw, not just for Battleground. So in any case, I wanted to tee that up. And Lindsay, can you just give us the status of the letter?
Sure. So I took a look at the letter draft from Mike, the stakeholder that's working on the fundraising for it. I made a few changes to the letter, which is the two drafts that I sent you, the original one from Mike and then the one that I had made some changes on. This, I believe they're planning on submitting as part of an earmark request. And so that's what they're pursuing. They may also use the letter for other federal grant opportunities, but I believe that that's what they're pursuing at this point. So yes, it wouldn't require a county match. It wouldn't require any dollars coming from the county. It's just a local support letter that says we support their request for funding. That said, there's obviously always a bit of a political calculation in these things when you're talking about earmarks. So happy to talk about that in more detail, but that's sort of the sum of what they're looking for. But I know they need it in the next day or two.
But the letter that you added revisions to, you circulated it to each of the counselors, correct? Everyone has it?
No,
seen it?
I didn't, because it was for you to bring up during council time. So I didn't circulate. I'm happy to do so, but I did not circulate it.
I am going to weigh in on this because I'm concerned that if they are looking for a letter within the next day or two, that is probably pushing council on this topic a little bit faster than we can be pushed, which is not what I like to say, because I would like to see us be as responsive in every case as to the extent that we can. But we had some questions about the Y project, not just in terms of our own funding, but about the project in general, how it was going to be going forward and so on. And before a letter from council goes out, I'd like to see a discussion of those items. And I would also ask that a letter not go just from one person on council in response to their request for a letter, because I think should come from council or not, but not just from an individual. Is there any other thought on that? I know that you'd like to see it go ahead, Councilor Medvigi, but is there any other thought?
Basically, on that, Madam Chair, so you said we don't have enough time to deal with it in the next couple of days, and then you said no individual counselor should support it on behalf of the council. I'm not sure what alternative that gives us. I do support this. I think it's a great project. It's a legacy for our time in the county to join with a partner, a private partner, to bring a benefit to the region if they are able to complete their funding package. I mean, they've still have a lot of work to do to come up with these earmarks or grants and Battleground and other entities. And I think the tribe is also contributing. So I do support it. I will write a letter. I would rather have the council weigh in and support this project. And I'm sorry, Lindsay, I thought the letter had gotten to everyone, so it wouldn't be a surprise today. So that was my misunderstanding, because it's been
I'm sorry, Kathleen, does the city support this project at this point?
I've been unable to get an update from the city of Battleground. I know historically when we have chatted, there was some discrepancy in what was being shared with the different cities. But I have reached out to them and I can send you an update. on that as well. And just as a matter of process, a kind reminder for agenda items that the chair can put agenda items on today, and any other counselor who wishes to add an agenda items, we just need 2 counselors to support that. So just as a reminder for process in the future.
But Lindsay, you said they need the letter today or tomorrow?
Yeah, the deadline, I think they're hoping to have it by the 8th or 9th, or I guess it would be the 8th because the 9th is Saturday.
I wouldn't feel comfortable sending a letter if it is in any contrary feelings to what the city is supporting.
Yeah,
Are there any thoughts?
yeah. So, Madam Chair, yeah, not having seen the letter, it's difficult for me to say whether I would support it or not. Generally, I don't think it's a good idea for the county and the council to consider financially supporting a private product or project like this. So I would not be in favor of anything that looks like we're going to provide any financial assistance to this project. Kathleen, just briefly in terms of letters, I know we've done this before, and I've got another one sitting here right in front of me that's in a similar situation. In terms of reviewing a letter and potentially supporting a letter, whether it's this one or this one, we have been able to do that like via email though, right? Just like, yeah, I mean, it's not I'm just trying to remember process. I believe we've had deadlines in the past where we've been asked to support an entity for a project.
Yeah, so the one thing you have to keep in mind is you can't count votes by emails. And so it could be a general conversation like you're having right now, and then you delegate and say, yes, we are in support of this project or this bill or whatever, and delegate that authority to staff to send it out, and we can send it out with the chair signature on that. But that decision to send it out still has to happen during a public meeting.
The decision to send it out has to take place in a public meeting?
That's correct. If it's being sent on behalf of the entire council, that it doesn't mean you can't share information prior. You can't deliberate on an email. You can't respond.
No, I understand that.
And
sort of
so
feel like
to have that support, it would need to go through a public meeting to show that there's a majority of the council that support that. But there is some flexibility on if there's going to be edits made with the council's support during the public meeting.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll wait till this topic's finished and then I'll complicate it further.
Were there other concerns that we had several months ago when this project was talked about with us, other than the funding and the question of whether the city's support was there or not? I'm trying to recollect all of that conversation.
The prior conversation was specifically about a potential financial contribution from the county for property and land acquisition. So some of it surrounded, was this the appropriate parcel? Were there other county parcels that could potentially, come into the mix? So there were some of those topics discussed, but that's not really the discussion point at this juncture.
Madam Chair, again,
Yes.
I wouldn't say that I am opposed to supporting a request. Lindsay mentioned political capital type. I think where we can help our community and help our constituents, I think we should do that by trying to stay in our own lane. But how we can do this, and again, there's another request coming up here in between now and the end of the week, is the question I think that we need to grapple with, and whether we can see the letter, whether we can, I don't know, how we can support if we choose to support it without having another public meeting.
Here?
Yes.
Yeah,
Councilor
I'm feeling similar to what you've stated and what Councilor Olson has stated. I think that this project has a lot of merit, but without seeing the letter, it's difficult to be able to give consent one way or another. I would want to be careful about making financial promises of any kind. So I definitely would want to know where the city of Battleground is on this. I think that's terribly important. I would be open. I'm not. I'm hesitating because I'm not sure how productive this would end up being. I would be open to, as a council, tentatively approving a letter that we were emailed, so that if we did all agree on it, it could go out. But knowing that we all may have changes and we might not be able to get to that consensus since we can't have a meeting about it. I'm not sure if that's a productive use of time. If the rest of the council wanted to go in that direction, I'd probably support that. But otherwise, I'd say maybe there is simply a way we can keep tabs on this project and offer additional support in the future as appropriate.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilor Olson.
And maybe this question for Lindsay, actually. How long is this requested letter?
In terms of the length of the letter itself?
Yeah. Is it 2 paragraphs, 6 paragraphs, 2 pages?
It's short. I could read it now if you want.
I was just going to say, can we just look at it? If it's
Yes,
just
we
a
can
couple
pull
minutes?
it up. We can pull it up and share it. And I will say, I just searched my emails and it does look like Councilor Mevaji sent a draft to everybody on 3/29. I don't, and my guess is that's not the draft that Lindsay had edits to. So the council did receive this on March 29th from Councilor Mevaji, but it is pulled up in front of you now. And I think we have both drafts. One was the original and maybe one's the one that Lindsay had made some edits.
You scroll up just a bit. Thank you.
This does indicate in that next to last sentence that Battleground has identified the community desire for this project.
I believe this is the original letter that they had put together. I revised a version. This is the original letter that the stakeholder.
I haven't spoken with anyone from the city council or councilors in a while about this project. It's been up and down, and obviously they've had some changes in council positions as well. But there generally was a sense that the public wanted it. There was certainly some dissent and split on the council until it actually comes up for vote. I mean, they were at least looking at the equivalent of about $1 million of benefits, concessions on impact fees and things like that. But I certainly cannot speak for the city of Battleground, and I don't think we would really know until the issue actually came before them. But what was expressed to me by the YMCA representative is that there has been somewhat of a sea change. It's all been positive, and they believe there is support by the city council at this point.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, so so the commitment for the $3 million, I don't know that there's, maybe that's I'm becoming less comfortable actually, because I don't believe that the city of Battleground had ever committed $1 million in impact fee waivers and what have you. I don't believe that ever took place. And so I'm a little bit concerned about some of the communication that's taking place. So I have a little bit more concern now than I did 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, the drafts that are here, I don't know, I can share my screen and show you the draft that I had come up with, if I can share my screen.
So I'm sorry, I'm looking at the revised draft and it doesn't mention any commitments other than the total cost.
Right. So I'll just read aloud what I had. That on behalf of the Clark County Council, it's our pleasure to write the letter of support for the Aquatic Center. It's an important project that deserves full consideration and support. That we've been meeting and working with our local YMCA on developing a pool for the region. The YMCA has made a commitment to purchase a centrally located piece of property for $3 million as the location for the new pool facility. An aquatic facility provides a tremendous opportunity for recreation, physical fitness, and swimming lessons for all residents in the area. North Clark County has grown considerably in recent years, but residents must drive a distance to any aquatic facility. Construction of the aquatic facility in Battleground would provide an important and affordable recreational opportunity and swim lessons for our community. We're hopeful that an infusion of federal funds will leverage additional public and private funding opportunities to be able to see this project come to fruition. Battleground has identified a desire for this project, and this planned approach is our best chance to deliver for our county, our region, and our children. Thank you for your interest. So that's the, I'll pull it up here.
And Lindsay, would this be our third project that we're advocating federal funds for?
Not officially, because we have our requests in for an earmark. So this would be us supporting somebody else's request, supporting a nonprofit request. Just from a political capital standpoint, it's one of those that the more things we throw our support behind, the weaker our support becomes for each of them. And I think that there's then a reasonable question from our congressional delegation of, okay, well, you put in your earmark request, but we see you also support this. Where is it in terms of your priorities? Because they may not feel like, oh, well, we're giving this to Clark County, particularly for our senators, because they're looking statewide, saying, okay, well, what can we make sure we spread out our projects so that there's an impact statewide? So the more projects that get requested from Clark County, the less likely the Clark County projects are to get funded. But again, this is all politics. There's no metric that says we can only submit 2 or we can only do certain things. It's not like a typical federal grant request.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilor Olson.
So given that context, I think I will complicate things right now. I think now's the right time. You received from Chairman Barnett's office an email probably about a half an hour ago. I don't know if you've had a chance to see it or look at it yet. He sent me a text right after council time got started, and they are making a request for support for some improvements to behavioral health clinic. Now this is in Longview, and I think Kathleen, you have that as well. I asked him to send it to you. And again, it's a short time frame, similar time frame. I think that the gist is that we lend our support to their request for funds to improve this behavioral health clinic and create access to more people in Southwest Washington. And if Kathleen can put this up there. So I guess to your point about what projects we support and why, and I know this is a short time as well because it just came today, but I wanted to at least put it out there for conversation. And it would have come from, email would have come from
Lori Goodwin.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I just found it and I had not seen it before. Mine arrived at 9:32 a.m. So
right. It
was right when we were underway.
Yeah, I asked him to send you a copy and to send one to Kathleen just so that somebody else had it. So I don't know if that's something we want to put up on to talk about, but it is in the same context of timing on a letter, supporting other earmarks, priorities, what have you. And I believe he has a deadline of Friday, I think he told me.
Julie, I haven't seen it yet, but just as you've described it, I can't imagine that I wouldn't support what they're requesting. And so I think we should come up with a way to be nimble. I'm taken a bit by surprise because I thought the letter from the YMCA was more broadly circulated and known. And in fact, I thought they were reaching out to each of the counselors to describe where they were at in the process and how this letter would help them. So, I mean, there are other things coming. And mentioning the ARPA committee that we're working on for small businesses and nonprofits, you know, we're gonna be getting requests. North County Emergency Services is gonna ask for money from the ARPA funds, from our remaining money that's uncommitted to help build their new building in the North County. You know, the YMCA is going to be asking for money. I mean, these are all separate issues that are a little bit more complicated and really commit us personally as a council to funds out of a very limited amount of funding available. But these letters of support are really in a different category, as Lindsay has said, and I think we should be a little bit more robust in giving. If it sounds like something we do support, you know, these diversified behavioral health clinics are exactly what the community needs. And even though this one may be as far as Longview, it will benefit Southwest Washington, Clark County. So I would support a letter of support in their quest for an earmark or funding or grant, however it's situated.
And Madam Chair, is that what's up on?
Yes, so what's being shared
Yeah, okay,
today is the letter from College Tribe that Councilor Olson referenced this morning.
Yeah, and just piggybacking on Councilor Medved's comments, I also would support this. I think, you know, it's more and more behavioral health clinic are critically needed. This one's in Longview, but it's also available to service all of Southwest Washington. So I would be in support of their request.
I would too. I don't see that there are any red flags or questions raised. I think their letter is drafted really well. They're the ones making the request, and they're the ones who ask us to send in the letter of support. That's very straightforward. And they are seeing that this is needed in the Longview area. And I think it's terrific that they're willing to work toward this end for that support in the community. So I would like to see us go ahead with the council supporting this as well.
I'm supportive of this.
So Councilor Medved, have you had a chance to read it now?
Yeah, I just read it as it was put up on the screen. Yeah, I support it. And I do support the letter for the YMCA, and if the council can't react in a positive way to that, I'll just do it over my District 4 signature.
And Madam Chair, Kathleen or Lindsay, what would be the timing then if council approves this letter of support for the Cowlitz Tribe? Is that something we can get done today or tomorrow, or what's the timeline look on that for them?
Yeah, with no changes, we can send it out today.
Great, thank you.
And I don't see the need for anything except some additions and not changes. By describing who we are, etc.
Yeah, should I move to approve, or would we like a motion on this then? Move to.
Let's do.
Okay, I move that the council support the letter from the Cowlitz Tribe as presented.
I second. Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. So we'll send that one. Now let's get disposition on the one from the Y. I feel the
was
need
just-
still for the answer to some more questions about the city's support of this project before sending the letter. I don't know if there's time to get that within the next day or two. Kathleen, you had already placed the call. Maybe you will hear shortly, but I don't feel comfortable without that knowledge.
Okay, fair enough. So Lindsay, if you could just put my signature block on it for 4th District, and
But this is not on behalf of the Clark County Council. It would be
that's
a
what I
much
just said.
more limited approach.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry that I thought they had met with each of you. I thought the letter had gone out either by Lindsay or myself last week as far as the revision. So I'm so surprised that this caught everyone by surprise, but that's okay. It's just a pool for the benefit of all. And I don't think you'll know for certain what would happen in the city council until they put it up for a vote. So, I mean, you can make inquiries of the city administrator or individual members, the mayor, but until it went up for a vote, I don't think you'd know for sure what they're actually going to commit to the project.
So with that said, if I can ask, if I can converse with the city manager, and she does share that overall there is support, not necessarily specific dollar amounts or anything, is that something then that the full council would want to be on this letter?
Well, obviously I favor signing the letter by the council.
If we could get from the city manager confirmation that there is city support for this, I would feel much better about this letter. I would have another small edit to the second paragraph. We have been meeting and working with our local YMCA implies a lot more involvement than and implies some ownership of the project. So I would, if it were to go forward and had the city's approval, I would like to change that sentence to say the Clark County Family YMCA has been developing a pool for the battleground region, so that it is not implied that county is working on developing this pool.
That's a good change in my opinion too.
No issue at all with that change.
So I will make that change and get that draft to staff. And then if Kathleen's able to hear back, we can include more signatures, or if not, then we can send it out from Councilor Medvigi. Is that what I'm hearing?
I do want to make sure I have a majority that's supporting that. I've only heard, I think, 2 confirmations, and it may have happened when I had to step out for a second, but I want to make sure that we have at least 3 counselors that is supporting this going out on behalf of the council if the city manager indicates that they're supportive of the project.
I'll support that with the changes that we've discussed in the letter as well, and with your assurance that Battleground really is behind this.
Okay. All right. I will, I'll reach out to her again this afternoon, and I will just email you all what I find out, and we'll move forward accordingly.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was a part of a counselor report from Councilor Medvigi. Do you have a 4th report?
No, that does it for me.
Okay. I just have a quick question on the ARPA timeline that you had mentioned. What is the deadline now for community organizations to submit an application, or has that been set?
So I don't think I wrote down exactly what it is. It'll be an online portal and so Mark had already teed up a framework for what the application would look like. It would be web-based. but it'll be in the next few weeks to start where it'll be opened. So the primary discussion, not only on structure, was how we're going to get the word out. And the different Chamber of Commerce will really work on getting it out as well to make sure all the small businesses. So it'll be the narrative, the publication of the process will be forthcoming, but it should be within a few weeks to open it up, to start submitting. And they already have a list. Mark Gasway and his staff already are people that have shown an interest or expressed an interest in submitting for a grant. So they've already put a list together that will be specifically notified once the portal is open.
And I can,
go ahead.
no, and I can share, Mark did send me a summary of the timeline, which I will send to the council as well, but I can just briefly go over that. So defining the program parameters has already been done. Now until the 15th is develop information material and application. And then the last 2 weeks of April is the committee will review and approve material communication program with potential applicants and start getting the word out. Accepting applications would be for the month of May. Staff will screen the applications for eligibility and work with them to be eligible. June 1st to the 15th, the committee will review only eligible applications. June 16th to the 30th, the committee will present accepted applications to the full council and officially award grants at that time. And then July 1, the funding available to recipients will be available. And then the end of October is the first quarterly report that will be available. And I will send this all to the council as well.
And if Mark could please put some of that information about when the application is available online, that would be helpful to community folks who are already applying. And they're applying with simply a letter of application, which maybe is going to be preferred down the road that they submit the online application only. So,
Yes.
the more we can get out there to people, the better. And I think this is going to be a very popular program from the looks of it.
And it looks like, from April 16th to the 30th, that's when the communication plan is going to be going out. But anything that's coming in right now by email that's being forwarded to me, I am forwarding on to the auditor's office. So it's already getting included in this process ahead of time.
Can I add one more point to the discussion? We by vote had already allocated notionally $2 million to this pot of grants. So depending on what the flow of applications, at some point it may be overwhelming. And that was some of the discussion we had. If you only had, we'll open up grants for $5,000. Well, you may get 1,000 requests for a $5,000 grant. We wouldn't be able to administer it. So the point I want to make is we may at some point, depending on how this fleshes out, revisit the $2 million allocation. It may be appropriate to shrink it. It may be appropriate, more likely, to expand it.
Are there other counselor reports? I had just one that I would like to share with you from CREDC, the Economic Development Group, from our last Board of Directors meeting. I just thought it was very informative. They had done a study that showed what the makeup is of businesses in Clark County. I don't know if you were guessing how many businesses we have here, what your number would be, but it is almost 16,000. It's 15,942 total businesses that have employees in Clark County. And of those, 500 are in manufacturing, 2,100 are professional or scientific organizations, and 428 are information services. So it's an interesting makeup of those 16,000 businesses. They also did a survey of those 16,000 as they wish to expand not just the number of employees, but expand their services in general. what are the issues that they face. And the number one issue was real estate needs, where they cannot find available land for their expansion. And number two was permitting struggles. So we've certainly heard about these issues in other contexts. It was just important, I think, to realize that they are there and prevalent yet still in this other form as well. Other councilor reports? Okay,
Chair?
I see none. So
No,
are
Chair,
there any?
Chair.
Yes, Councilor Woods.
Yes, sorry. I think I was saying chair as you were saying, let's go on. Just a brief one from CTRAN. I participated last Friday in the exit conference for CTRAN's triennial and review, financial review with the FTA and the auditors. And this is their second review in a row with no deficiencies reported. Which apparently is quite rare that an organization will go for 2 cycles in a row without any deficiencies reported. So that's great news for the organization, which I've said before and will continue to say because it's true, is incredibly well run and full of fantastic people throughout the organization. And this is yet another validation of their hard work. So,
Thank you. Other councilor reports? Then let's move to any work session requests.
There are no requests this morning.
And Lindsay, how about other policy issues for you to report on?
Nothing further from me today. Thank you.
Okay, well, this concludes the main agenda for our council time, but now we will move into 2 executive sessions, one on collective bargaining, taking 10 minutes, one on performance of a public employee, taking 10 minutes for a total of 20 minutes total. Will council be present for those, Kathleen?
Yes, that is correct.
And this is relative to authorization RCW 42.30.110, section 1G. It is 11:02. Let's count on our return at 11:25 in order to hopefully at that time there won't be action taken, will there?
That's correct. There's no action today.
No action. So we would be just adjourning council time is what we anticipate at 11:25. So see you in executive session, council.
Hello, everyone. The council is extending the executive session to 11:45. That's 20 more minutes. Thank you. Kind of did that backward. Hello, the council is extending executive sessions for 15 more minutes until noon. Thank you. Hello, this is to let you know the council has extended the executive session for 10 more minutes, and they will be back at about 12:10. Thank you.
We have completed the executive sessions that were scheduled for today, Wednesday, April 6th. We are back in council time at this time, and the purpose of our being here is for none other than to adjourn. So this council time meeting is now adjourned.